You know, folks, basic decency after a major tragedy is that you should at least wait a little bit before you politicize it. Unless, of course, you're a shameless gun-grabbing political operator bent on using the suffering of others to score cheap points for your agenda. Within minutes of the news of the horrific attack on a country music concert in Las Vegas that killed 59 people and wounded over 500, the gun-grabbing opportunists got to work both on and off Capitol Hill. And while Democrat politicians were busy grandstanding about gun laws, the usual crop of gun myths started to circulate all over again. And we're going to address them. Here's the first. Just hours after, failed presidential candidate Hillary Clinton jumped on the politicizer wagon to talk about a completely unrelated House bill about loosening restrictions on gun suppressors, saying they'd make it harder to hear gunshots in an active shooter situation. Okay, it's no secret that a lot of anti-gun politicians are clueless about the things they're trying to regulate, but Mrs. Clinton, guns are loud, and silencers don't silence them. In reality, putting a suppressor on an AR-15 sized rifle is going to take the gunshot noise from louder than a plane taking off to about the volume of a jackhammer. Don't believe everything you see in the movies, kids. And the kicker? The suppressor bill wasn't even scheduled for a vote this week. But while we're still talking about the suppressor non-issue, we have whatever this was.
Sportsmen, hunters would make an argument that they need that so that their target, whether it's a deer, etc., don't hear the shot.
Have you ever been in a deer blind? Again, guns are loud, and deer bug out when they hear footsteps. The real reason that law-abiding gun owners want this is because guns are loud, and they're trying to cut down on hearing damage. And if you don't believe me, get in your car and drive out to somewhere where real law-abiding gun owners live and talk to them. Moving on. Some in the anti-gun crowd say that nobody should have access to an automatic weapon like the killer was initially believed to have used. In fact, hours after the massacre, actor Boris Kodjoe said via Twitter that he told his 10-year-old that anybody in the United States can get an automatic weapon. Now, this is a flat-out lie, and I would really hope that a father wouldn't scare his child with it intentionally. Look, automatic weapons are super hard to get. The process involves an in-depth background check, requires a special tax, they go on a registry, and they require the approval of a chief law enforcement officer. Basically, it's everything the anti-gun lobby has ever asked for. Furthermore, legally obtained automatics have been used in just a small handful of crimes since the 1930s. But that doesn't fit the gun control narrative. And now we're getting reports that the killer used a device that speeds up the rate of fire on semi-automatic weapons and doesn't fall into the laws surrounding automatic weapons. And we're going to have more on this as the story develops, but this is why you have to wait for details. Now moving on. Comedian Jimmy Kimmel also decided to weigh in on this issue, which makes sense given his now public role as Chuck Schumer's spokesman on late night TV.
There are loopholes in the law that let people avoid background checks if they buy a gun privately from another party, if they buy a gun online or at a gun show.
This is an old one, dude. There's not some big loophole that lets people throw around firearms willy-nilly either online or at a trade show. Yes, there are some situations where you could buy a firearm without a federal background check. But those are in sales between two private individuals residing in and remaining in the same state, which doesn't have its own background check laws. But those are a vast minority of cases. And yes, you could expand the law and make private sales a lot more difficult, but the vast majority of these mass murderers wouldn't have been caught by an expanded background check. Moving on.
Second Amendment, I guess, our forefathers wanted us to have AK-47s, is the argument. I assume.
Okay, this one's another old trope, but if you want to make that argument, at least be consistent about it and stop exercising your free speech on television and go back to printing off humorous pamphlets on a movable block printing press and disseminating them to the townspeople. Now, this is all not to cast doubt on his concern here. Kimmel's from Vegas and he's hurting. We're all hurting. But as Ben Shapiro says, facts don't care about any of our feelings. And so here's the biggest myth that we see every time the gun grabbers have a new tragedy to exploit. Oh, we can pass common sense measures to stop things like this.
Common sense, gun control.
Common sense, gun control.
Common sense, gun safety.
Common sense, gun safety measures.
Common sense, gun control legislation.
We've heard this so much that it's become a near meaningless term to cover a bunch of different nebulous proposals that feed off this and other myths. Find me a common sense gun control policy that would put a stop to mass shootings, isn't already on the books at some level, and actually fits in with the Constitution as written. You can't. That doesn't exist. And any serious person on the anti-Second Amendment side of this discussion knows that. What this debate is really about is moving the cultural needle away from freedom and towards government confiscation of firearms and the repeal of the Second Amendment. And that's why the gun grabbers can't wait to start politicizing a tragedy like this one the minute it happens. Their agenda doesn't have the weight to move forward unless they manipulate human suffering to do it. I'm Nate Madden, and this has been your Capitol Hill Brief. Thanks for joining us. We'll see you next time.